What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Pioneer video, and today we kind of got a little 2-for-1 special here as not only is this deck doing very well currently in the Pioneer format and definitely a viable option, it's also very budget in the grand scheme of kind of like what the cost of the format is to play some of the decks that are currently, seeing the highest usage in the format. So definitely really cool, and I think the first time that I've kind of went out of my way to feature a deck for functionality and the price of the deck as well. So of course, before we get into the mono red aggro deck in Pioneer, let's take a minute to let y'all know that if you're not already currently subscribed to the channel, what the heck are you doing? I post Pioneer content, modern content. I stream on YouTube now, or I'm going to start streaming on YouTube now. And of course, I try to incorporate some other SA type videos into it. I actually have one planned for tomorrow that I'm going to record in the morning and hopefully get uploaded relatively quickly at my normal time. So if that is of any interest to you, subscribe, ring notification bell, and you can go into the description of this video as well and join the Discord server as well. And to get to talk about Magic and all that cool stuff. And I try to communicate and chat whatever in there as much as possible. I share, when I go live, all that stuff. So definitely some cool things to check out. So mono red aggro is a tale as old as time. That mono red is just like this, super aggro like burn deck. Like you are just absolutely trying to win the game as fast as possible, no questions asked. This deck is kind of doing something just a little bit on like the special side. It's getting to play cards like Get 2 Lava Runner, Monastery Swiftspear, Soulscar Mages as your 1-drops. Swiftspear we're all, well, acquainted with, from like the mono red decks of like Khans of Tarkir and like all these aggressive decks. 1 mana, 1/2 with haste and prowess. You're gonna get the initial point of damage in, like if you play this on turn 1, and then as you play some of your other spells, that we see down here that we'll get to in a moment, this card's going to end up scaling up. You're going to end up getting to deal a ton of damage and win some trades in combat that you might not have won, with any other creatures that you could be playing in this deck. Soulscar Mage, you miss out on the initial burst, like the initial 1 point of damage when you play it, or initial burst, like when if you play it like later in the game. But with its passive ability of sources dealing non-combat damage, you could just shrink your opponent's creatures, put counters on them, and then it makes combat a little bit easier for cards like Get 2 Lava Runner and Vashina Pyromancer to do damage because they're just going to be permanently shrunk and even have the potential for like stacking up multiple removals like spells over the course of a few turns on some bigger threats, rather than having to spend 3-4 mana and 2 or 3 cards all at once to deal with threats. So definitely very versatile in that sense. Also, again, just having prowess just allows it to be really aggressive even without the keyword haste stapled onto it. Get 2 Lava Runner is one that we don't normally see, and kind of why I save it for last, because it's kind of one of the reasons for playing some of the cards that you do in this deck. So it's essentially it's a 1 mana 1/2, when you play it on turn 1, but it will kind of make up that point of power that it doesn't have if you are able to cast 2 instants and sorceries. So if you're able to have 2 or instant sorcery cards in your graveyard, it gets +1/+0 and has haste. So future Get 2 Lava Runners are going to essentially be like 1 mana 2/2s, like Goblin Guides without really any downside. While it doesn't get the overall like burst of damage if you cast like a flurry of spells in the same turn like you will with Swiftspear and Soulscar Mage, but it does have a key creature type in its name, being a wizard. And you'll notice with Soulscar Mage, same thing, it's a wizard. And moving on to some of our other creatures like Vashina Pyromancer is a wizard. Like this is basically Harry Potter tribal. Everything's a wizard. So when it enters the battlefield, this deals 2 damage to target player or planeswalker. You have like a little bit of versatility in that sense. A lot of the time this is going to go to the face. Because we're a burn deck. Like we don't care about anything. If your life total is at 1, it is way too high. So this has like essentially pulls double duty. It's like it has virtual haste because it's going to ETB. It's more than likely going to deal 2 damage right to your opponent. So it's like it got to attack, being a little bit better because obviously in the late game, your opponent has the ground kind of gummed up. It's going to get in 2 points of damage, like essentially unblocked. So that's kind of a bonus. Sometimes just like dealing that 2 points of damage to a planeswalker, like you can get rid of like a Karn, after it's already got to tick down twice. Again, you're not in a very good position, but you are able to kind of answer a Karn in that way. Moving on, you have Bone Crusher Giant, essentially a like mini removal spell, 2 damage to any target. That's something. It's burn. It's what the deck really wants, especially like in these mono red like aggressive decks. And you get a 3 mana 4/3 for your troubles as well that can kind of damage your opponent if they use like a removal spell on Bone Crusher Giant as well. So definitely, definitely has its spots. Like the not nearly as efficient, I would say. I mean, like stat wise, it's pretty good. 4 mana for a 4/3 or 3 mana for a 4/3. Pretty good. But obviously, lacks kind of like the initial punch. You got to play it, wait a turn while it's in play, while like Swift Spear and get 2 Lava Runners just kind of get in that damage right away. But over the course of a game, like Bone Crusher Giant is just going to kind of trample over, not literally, but metaphorically, over some of the smaller creatures in the format and like force your opponent into some bad blocks. And of course, like with these other spells and stuff, plus your prowess creatures, like they block in a way that, maybe they trade off with some of your creatures and all of a sudden like they have no board and all your creatures are still around and you're hitting for tons of damage. So definitely a card that I would say is like the worst creature in your deck, just simply because it doesn't have like the right creature type for one of like your payoff cards and whatnot, and just the fact that it's not like cheap compared to everything else, but it is still a very powerful card and a very good card to have in the deck, just with its versatility and just essentially being 2 cards stapled together. Moving on to the spells, we said that Wizard was an important creature type. We see it on Get 2 Lava Runner, we see it on Soulscar Mage, we see it on Vice, Pyromancer. You have 12 of your 20 creatures are a Wizard. And so the card that really cares about it is the card Wizard's Lightning, which essentially allows you to play Lightning Bolt in Pioneer. It costs 2 less if you control a wizard. It deals 3 damage to any target. And obviously it's been a big deal in Modern. It's been a big deal in Modern for a long time just to have access to Lightning Bolt and kind of like what sets it apart from other formats and stuff. I mean, we've seen it in like every format, even in Legacy. Like Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, very powerful. So the fact that you have a very low cost to build around for Wizard's Lightning, and you kind of want to play some of these creatures anyway, like Vaishino Pyromancer probably being like the worst one, just because again, like that 1 toughness, pretty bad, especially when you play against like Rakdos Sack and like some of these other decks that can just deal 1 damage to any target. But thankfully, there isn't any Orcish Bowmasters flying around, so Pyromancer could probably live for like a turn or 2, so you can get off some of these Wizard's Lightnings. And the fact that like if you really think about it, like a lot of these spells are like cost 3, but they're really 1. So, you play a Get 2 Lava Runner on turn 1, you're able to like Wizard's Lightning your opponent and then, skewer the critics them. So you're hitting them for 8 damage on turn 2, they're down to 12. That's a lot. Or 10, they shock a land into play, that is a thing that can happen. So like you just get in like a ton of damage early on, like with Swift Spear, it gets to be like even more, even like Soulscar Mage, I guess, really is like a way that it ends up adding up to be more. But you just deal so much damage, out of nowhere. Light Up the Stage is like excellent, like card advantage in a way, because you're more than likely going to be able to play both cards, by the end of your next turn. Even if you like Light Up the Stage on turn 2, like you Lava Runner and then Wizard's Lightning your opponent and gets Spectacle, Light Up the Stage, like chances are you're going to be able to play whatever spells they are. And if you hit both spells, that's great, because again, you're going to be able to play both of them. Hit land spell, that's awesome. You're going to eventually be able to cast your Bone Crusher Giants, maybe even like channel your Sogenzins and stuff. So Light Up the Stage is definitely a way that you can play like 19 lands in this deck and eventually get to the point where you can activate like Den of the Bugbear and Sokenzin along with, just casting a flurry of spells, by like the 3rd or 4th turn of the game. Spikefield Hazard, dealing a damage to any target, fine. Like, it's going to trigger Spectacle. It's going to kill those pesky elves that can get in the way of some of your other creatures and stop you from putting out, like, tons of damage. It can also be played as a land in a pinch when you need it. Play with Fire, getting to deal 2 damage to any target, just being like a little bit of an upgrade to like something like Spikefield Hazard, but you also get to scry when you hit your opponent with it, and a lot of your burn spells kind of want to go to the face anyway, just because they are going to end up dealing a ton of damage, between like prowess triggers and the damage on the cards itself. It also gives you the benefit of scrying, which can allow you to go through lands and stuff if you already have plenty, or to help you find another land so you can continue to cast some of your more expensive spells. Lastly, you have Kamano, Faces of Kakazan, which is going to deal damage when it comes into play, as a way that you can trigger Spectacle for your light up stages and skewer the critics without having to target your opponent. Also going to chip Planeswalkers, which is just kind of a nice benefit to an already decent first chapter. Giving your next creature +1/+1, or entering the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter, and then of course the backside having haste and getting to deal exile creatures, which can be pretty good against some of the threats from mono green that care about dying, like Troll, where it gets to essentially enchant a land, let it tap for extra mana while keeping the devotion, and then Cavalier, which gets to get a card back, which could help your opponent out immensely compared to kind of where you're at as this mono red aggro deck. Some of the lands we alluded to, 10 mountains, super easy. You have 4 Ramanop Ruins, essentially a land that's going to pay you off for drawing a ton of lands, just being able to burn your opponent for those last points of damage. Soken's in, which taps for a red, but could make 2/1/1s, and again be another way that you could push through some extra damage. Den of the Bugbear, being this land that is going to come into play untapped pretty early in the game. Even if you play it as your third land, chances are on 2 lands, aside from casting a Bone Crusher Giant, you're going to have access to a lot of your spells and stuff. So you're not really going to be hurting for your third land coming into play tapped some amount of the time. Sideboard, you have End Festivities, Red Cap Melee, Rending Volley, kind of these who's of red spells that are just going to deal with varying sizes of creatures and stuff, depending on what you're playing against in the format and what you're expecting to play. So that is Mono Red Aggro for the Pioneer format. Mono Red is definitely a deck that punishes people for stumbling, and this deck is no exception. I mean, with the amount of 1-drops that are in the deck and the amount of theoretical 1-drops, keeping 1/2 land hands with this deck and then just having 5 spells, and then the amount of lands you're playing, you're just going to end up playing so much stuff that you're going to overwhelm your opponent if they don't have very specific answers at the right time. They're really gonna have to hit the board early, and if they're using their resources that they put to the board to end up playing more things, that could ultimately lead to their death. So yeah, that's going to do it for me in this video. I hope y'all enjoyed. If you did, please remember, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, ring the notification bell so you know when the videos get posted, join the Discord server, links in the description below, and yeah, that's going to do it for me. Hope y'all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.